Good morning, and thank you for joining us today for Standalone Environment, the Bare Metal Environment for Rebuilding Trust. My name is Sammy. I'm with New Era Software. I have Glennon Bagsby, also with New Era, who will be here presenting today. Thank you so much for the time today, Glenn, and I'm just going to turn it right over to you.
All right, thank you, Sammy. Can you confirm you can hear me okay and see my first slide?
Yes, I sure can.
All right. Well, I'd like to thank everyone for coming out and spending about 30 minutes with us to talk about one of the capabilities we have here at New Era Software called the standalone environment. Some of you are familiar with that. I can see from the customer list that of the attendees, some of you are customers of SAE. It's been around for over 35 years. It's a product that was originally thought of as a ultimate recovery tool, and some of you have purchased it and use it in that way, either at home or at your hot site to facilitate building your systems, running your hot site test, or recovering from failed IPLs, either at the hot site or at home. It has other utility functions in it as well. One in particular is something called fast DASD erase. Name says it all. It erases DASD volumes extremely fast. But what I want to talk about today is using SAE in a slightly different way that adds value to it for what's going on in the industry today. And we're going to talk about how it can help you rebuild the trust that you've established around your ZOS environments. Now, I'm not going to explain what trust is. Everyone knows what that is. Everyone has an opinion of what we mean when you have trust in a configuration or trust in bringing up a ZOS LPAR or an entire sysplex. And that trust could be something as simple as there's no error messages, or it could be I don't want a catastrophic failure where one of the IPLs fail. Or it could be you detect some obscure message you haven't seen before, or you realize that there's been a change made to the configuration that wasn't planned or wasn't anticipated. All of those things are add to your understanding of can I trust the system right now? And what we're going to do is help you think about how you can use SAE to help you reestablish that trust. You need to rebuild it. Sometimes that means you have to do restores. Sometimes you have to make simple edits. But the foundation of that configuration, those elements that build that LPAR or build that sysplex, are what's critical in putting up that foundational operating system where you can run your applications and run your business and have it exactly the way you want it to be. So basically, trust is it the way it's supposed to be? And can I use it the way I expect to use it? And we're again, SAE is there to help you maintain that and make sure that you can reestablish that in case you do see a problem or a problem does exist and you want to correct it quickly. Now, when we talk about dealing with recovering trust, there's really a couple different levels you need to think about. One is what we call precision recovery. You've probably read about this, or maybe some AI applications may have pointed it out to you. But precision recovery is basically a very quick understanding of what the problem is and using simple techniques to correct that problem. Edit functions. There's an extra data set that's been added to the APF list that I didn't expect to be there. I need to go edit the PROG member and get that off the list. It wasn't supposed to be there, so I can easily fix it. I can remove that or enter a command and delete it out of memory or whatever I need to do to fix that problem. So it's the ability to understand where the risk fault arrived from, or what is that risk fault that you need to correct, and correct it quickly. And usually, again, with to basically edit things. Maybe instead of a whole data set, it's you need to rename it or point it to a backup or change a member or whatever the case might be that you want to do to reestablish the trust at this level. So it's more of a precision action. But obviously, you have to have edit capability up and you have to be able to have access to whatever resource it is that needs to be corrected or backed off or whatever change is required. But the precision part is something that we'd like to deal with because it's an easy, fast fix. But sometimes if that's not the answer and we need to advance from that, then we're talking about doing more of might call it a clean room recovery. Now, I'm using terminology clean room here. It doesn't mean that you have to have adopted the clean room, secure boot, validated boot practices that IBM has made available to you. But it's basically the idea of I have a trusted copy of whatever's corrupted or whatever's causing the lack of trust. And I need to put that in play and take the bad one out in some way, whether it be a member or a data set or an entire volume or whatever action you want to take. And you need to be able to copy that from the trusted version to the corrupt or the non-trusted version and replace it. Now, this sounds simple, but in reality, it gets very complicated because if that trusted version is in a air-gapped environment, or maybe it's on a subset of devices that are an alternate subchannel set, not available to the LPAR you're trying to repair or replace, there's extra steps that you have to go through in order to have access and be able to accomplish that copy or that move over of the trusted to the non-trusted environment. And oftentimes that requires the full volume restore. That even complicates it further because you have to worry about what else could be affected on that volume if I'm going to do a full volume restore. Are there other forward recoveries that I have to do? How do I get access to those other devices if they're not online to the LPAR that's having the trust issue? Do I have to bring up another LPAR? Do I need to reconfigure my DASI? If I reconfigure the DASI, am I exposing my trusted copies to the corrupt system? And so it's sort of like breaking the seal on that. And I don't want to do that. So there has to be all kinds of considerations and processes put in place to protect the trusted version at the same time have access to it in order to put it in play and restore the trust on the corrupt or the untrusted environment. So there's a lot of complication here that you need to consider. Even in the clean room, secure boots, validated boot processes and moving things around that you have to consider and take in account. And then again, you always have to validate the steps that you took and whether or not that solved the problem that you wanted to repair. Now, the last part of this is something called foundational recovery. And what this is saying is that whatever the elements are that are causing you to lose trust, you need a method of establishing trust in those elements and being able to put them back, either with precision recovery and edit kind of functions or with a restore function and a copy and replace kind of thing. SAE can help you do all of these things. And it's been there for 30 plus years, providing different services at different levels, supporting all new hardware, supporting the new operating system levels. So it's current, it's viable, and it adds value to you when you start considering things like the trusted copy is outside the universe of the volumes I have now. They're vaulted or they're on alternate subchannel sets. How do I get them over to the right environment? One of the first things that SAE can do for you is help you identify what's changed. Because oftentimes when you have an issue or a problem, the very first question that gets asked is, what's changed? Who made the change and why was it made? Was it documented? Was it appropriate? Is that what's causing me to have an issue or to lose trust in that environment? Well, our other product, Image Focus, is designed to build baselines and blueprints of the various LPARs and sysplexes over time. And it creates out these blueprints and baselines that are accessible by SAE. And what the standalone environment product can do is pull those baselines in and blueprints in and compare them to the current state of all the elements and identify for you element by element, member by member, line by line, what changes have been made to that since whatever point in time you tell it to compare to, whether it be the last IPL state or the last state when the maintenance was pushed out to that LPAR or to that sysplex. You can create baselines and blueprints for that and have the standalone product compare what was in that when that configuration was created or at that moment in time against the current values that exist and identify exactly what the differences are. So you would pinpoint where to look first on any kind of potential problem that's causing you to have a risk concern. Then it gives you the ability to edit services. Now, the standalone environment product, just to be clear for those of you who are not familiar with it, is a true standalone product. You IPL it directly from the HMC or locally onto any LPAR and give you access to an ISPF-like interface that I'll show you here in just a few moments, and gives you the ability to perform basic edit functions. Change a member, rename a data set, rename a member, copy data sets, allocate new ones, perform all kinds of services that you may need to do to restore the confidence you have in the configuration elements that you're dealing with. This is important because what we're talking about here is having a very quick and efficient way of accessing that trusted version to copy, perhaps, if you can't edit it. It might be just a member, again, an example of you go into a prog member and delete a line or change the vol seers on the statement because it's looking in the wrong place. Or maybe there's a failure in the TCP/IP configuration, and now you can't access because one of the ports aren't open anymore, or something's changed there. Whatever the problems are, we've seen all kinds of examples from customers where some things as simple as JES wouldn't start because it took a JCL error based on some modification somebody made, and they needed to fix the JCL to start JES environment. Those are kind of practical things that SAE can let you do with its edit services. But it also gives you the ability to look at the alternate subchannel sets. And this is very important when you talk about the idea of recovery in a clean room concept, which is if the protected copy or the trusted copy is not available to the LPAR that has the trust issue, how do I get access to that trusted copy to fix that? How can I move it forward and replace it? SAE can get access to those alternate devices and obviously then to trusted environment. And it does it in a very secure way. And I'll explain that in just a minute so that you're not opening the lock on those security systems. You're not exposing them in any way to where the corruption may already exist on the other LPAR, on the LPAR that's not trusted. SAE also has full restore capabilities. In addition to doing volume-to-volume copies, it can restore from DFDSS or the FDR product, or from IAB copy and IAB Jenner backups that may have been created either by SAE as its own utility that'll do that, or if you've done it in some other way. So the idea of SAE is to give you the ability to do your precision recovery, to do your clean room recovery if necessary, and give you the ability to identify what the potential problem is and direct you to where the solution to that problem exists and give you access to it. Now, this is a very busy slide. There's a lot of good words on it. I pulled it out of another presentation that talks about designing the entire process of building an environment where you can maintain mainframe resilience and availability. I'm not going to talk about all the things on this slide. I lifted it from that other presentation because if you look in the center of the screen or center of the slide, it talks about the three areas of recovery: precision recovery, clean recovery, and foundational recovery. And that's really where SAE comes in. It helps you restore the executable elements that exist to build a ZOS LPAR or Sysplex and give you the access to their backups to edit, to fix them, to do whatever you need to do to get past any kind of problem causing a risk. If you want this slide or the other slides I'm using, you can ask for a copy of the slides from Sammy later on, and she'll be glad to send it to you. But this is a very important functional slide, but we don't have time to go through all the points made on it, but it's certainly something that's worth your review. So what I want to do now is just show you a little bit of what I've been talking about SAE. Now, I have access to a little VM system where I can run it as a guest and bring up SAE in here. You can see, hopefully you can see my screen. Sammy, is that right now? Sammy?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. So I've logged on to the VTM as a guest, or excuse me, the VM as a guest here, and I'm using a function called sysg on the HMC. What this basically says is a function that IBM provides where you have a 3270 emulated session running directly on the HMC. SAE can be IPL'd by a file transferred from the HMC and forced down to any targeted LPAR, which basically means SAE doesn't have to be installed everywhere. It doesn't have to be resident on every LPAR where a problem could exist. It could be directly IPL'd from the HMC out to that LPAR and come back and reply and work with you through the sysg terminal on uh, the HMC. So what I want to do is IPL now, SAE, and you can see it came up very quickly, and it gives me the environment where I can use the tools and the services available with SAE. Now, as I said before, it is a standalone product. It does not need any ZOS instructions. It doesn't execute anything. It talks directly to the hardware itself and does all the I/O and all the data movement and all the information that it needs. It gathers itself. It is a single user, single use product. So when I exit out, it ends. No one else can log on and do the same thing in my session. They can start their own sessions and work independent, but these are working directly in the standalone product. It looks, feels, and acts a great deal like ISPF. It was obviously intentional, so it's something that's familiar if you're in a situation where you're trying to recover a failed IPL. For example, you don't want to have to go to a book and learn the different line commands and so on. So it's much more intuitive and available and familiar to all the users. Now, one of the things I talked about that you can do with SAE is to understand the change history. And so I'm going to option 4 here, which basically brings up an interface where I can have access to those blueprints and baselines created by the image focus product. There'd be an inventory of those out there accessible to this session, and I could pull up any one of the dates and times from the file of the different blueprints and say, compare that to the current configuration elements that are available on the LPAR where I'm running. And it will tell you what's been changed or what's different between those two environments. It can do that either from a blueprint standpoint, or it can go back to a baseline that you've frozen in time that says this is what the image looked like when I put the last maintenance on. It may have been a month ago or 3 months ago. So I can look at both yesterday, if that's something that I've got image focus running for, or I can go back 3 months and look at the original base that was built. So it gives you a lot of different ways that you can use the comparison. And that comparison then, again, answers the question, what's changed? And you want to begin your work there and analyzing and perhaps making repairs or changes. Now, the way the product really works, if I go into option 1 here, Action Services, what it does, it gives me a panel that lets me build, if you will, a universe or a list of devices that I want to work with. So I can choose them all and have access to all the DASI devices out there and all of the data sets on all those devices and be able to interact with them. But if I'm focused and I know where I want to go or what the potential problem is, I can use the abilities here to restrict that list and the searching of it for speed and for convenience. If I know I want a particular volume or the volume's in a particular range, I can specify that on units or on Valseer. I can also, at the very bottom of the panel, specify a data set name in conjunction with that, and it would search, let's say, the range 600 to 700, and only give me those volumes that have a fully qualified data set name that I put on the bottom. But please notice above this is where we've added something new to the product recently, and that's the ability to have it access the alternate subchannel sets. So even though when this LPAR was created, it may have only had access to 0, I can tell SAE to go out and get all of the devices that are physically available to this configuration. And I can now access and build my volume list on all of those as well. So that if I have backups created and stored on subchannel set 2, I can use those and copy those over to 0 or vice versa, or 3 or 2 or whatever the different combinations are. But once I fill this screen out, it gives me back that list that I can interact and act upon. So that list, I'll go back to my slides here just a moment, looks like this. I don't have a configuration in my VM where I can show you this live, but you can see from this example, I'm sorry, that at the bottom of this display, I have devices that start with uh, subchannel set 2. So I'm looking at 0, which is what I'm running on, but I also have access to 2. So I can now have access to these same volumes that normally would not be available to this LPAR if it was still up and running. So this is the one advantage that SAE can give you if you're actually air gapping or somehow dividing off your trusted versions from your executing versions and have a way of recovering them very quickly. Now, in my case, I'm simply going to hit enter here because, again, I'm on a very small, limited system. And it gives me all the DAS devices attached to this particular version or this particular VM guest, if you will. And you simply go through the process. Well, I want to select something on this volume. Here's the list of all the data sets on the volume. I might want to go down and say, well, I want to interact on this ParmLive data set, and I can come in and select it. Now you'll notice that right here, it's going to ask for a password. Because remember, there is no active LPAR up. There is no ZOS system behind this, which means there's no RAC ACF2 or top secret back here. So SAE has its own security system with 15 different levels of security applied by user ID. It has its own recording of all the activity that goes on. All the actions can be recorded into a log, so it's repeatable and auditable. It also, remember, it can be IPL directly from the HMC, which means that if you've secured that environment physically or with ZOSMF or other facilities, then it applies to this application as well. So you have multiple layers of security and protection that you can assign in order to use SAE in this way. And I'm going to put in the default password. And once I do, then I have distribution list of all the members that are in that particular data set. And you can see that I have all the same capabilities that you're familiar with ISPF. But if I go back to my volume list, you can see I can also do some things between volumes. And this is what I mentioned before. You can obviously sort the list and display the list and print the list. But one of the other things you can do is copy between the different volumes. This is the point I made before about pulling in a data set that might be on an air gap drive somewhere else, but I want to move it over to my production drive. I can do that here with SAE very simply through these panels without bringing up another LPAR or without reconfiguring the DASD or any other steps like that. I can create new data sets. I can do all kinds of things here at the volume level. And obviously you saw that these things all have help menus. So in the help menu at the data set level, I can copy between data sets on the same volume. I can copy between data sets across volumes at the volume level. I can allocate new ones. I can rename a data set, rename a member, whatever I need to do at this point. But let's go back to looking at that ParmLive member, the ParmLive data set. I go down to that with just a simple edit function. So let's say I want to pick on this BPXBRM member, which I can see was modified earlier today, and I want to select that. And now I'm directly in edit. I come back in and make whatever change I feel appropriate or needs to be made. I can delete that line, PO3 and save it, and it acts just like any other ISPF application. I've now fixed that problem or changed it. I go back in to my devices. I can use the same list if I've got a large inventory of drives. It'll keep that for me during this session. I don't have to regenerate it each time. In my case, this is so small, it doesn't matter. What I want to do now is come back into the same configuration and talk about other ways to use it. So again, if I come back into this ParmLive, So what I'd like to do now is take this guy and I want to rename him. Sorry. I want to rename him and just simply type in a new name here. It will actually rename the member for me. It should. What did I do wrong? Okay. Try it again. Okay, so now it's renamed that member and it's there. I can do the same thing at the data set level. I can do whatever. But the other thing that we can do with SAE is to point it to a different version of that data set. So by using data set rename and this facility that I'm going to show you, where if we select the catalog where it's in and we get the list of them up, I can actually redirect the catalog to point to a different volume. So I could rename the data set if I wanted to. But in this case, what I want to do is just simply tell them that the data set is now, instead of being on work A, it's on work B. And now he switched that over, and I'm now pointing to that data set on a different volume. So you can start to think about the possibilities of, well, all right, so I've got a good version of this on a device on channel set 2. I've got it over here on 0. I can copy it over there. I can rename it if it's got a bad or different name. If the catalog is pointing to a volume other than where I put it, I can change the catalog so it picks up the right version of that. Any kind of action that you need to get past that problem is available through you through the basic edit functions within the SAE product. But beyond that, there's more things we can do. One of the things we can do is allow you to do a full restore. So if restore is what you need to do to get everything back, I'm sorry, I need to do a 5. Then I can restore again from the different sources. I can use IV copy or IV generous. I can use DFDSS. I can use FDR. Now, in this case, for both DFDSS and FDR, I can actually scan the backups, identify an individual data set, and restore just a data set from one of those created full volume backups. So it gives me a way of not having to do a full volume restore. Potentially, you'd have to have enough knowledge and know what you're doing and know which one you want to restore. But it does give you the facility to pick out a data set out of that full volume restore and just put that one data set back. Now, obviously, you have data set copy that I showed you before that would let you do that. So there's different ways you can do it. Also, at the bottom, you can see we have volume compare and volume copy. This gives you the ability to do full volume work, copy one from another, and they need not be identical. Obviously, they can't go large to smaller, but they can't go smaller to large. That's fine, and you can compare the volumes together. So again, if I have a volume on channel 0 and on channel 2, I can compare those two volumes together to make sure they're identical. And these are track by track compares. So it gives you a very accurate picture of what the differences exist between those two environments. So again, the real benefit here for us dealing with using SAE as your recovery tool, we've always had the ability to help you fix things, put a comma where it belongs, rename a data set, create a new one, change the catalogs like I showed you. But this addition of allowing us to look at the full inventory of devices available hardwired to that environment you're in and give you the ability to use your air-gapped trusted values or content for these elements becomes very essential in the whole idea of strategy of recovering trust, because these are your trusted versions and you have access to them regardless how you protect them. We can use them to restore the trust that you are trying to do for that particular LPAR. Now I'm at the end of my 30 minutes. I tried to keep it to that, and I will entertain any questions if anybody has any. Go back over to my slides. And again, this is kind of summarizing what I just talked about using SAE. Thank you for attending, but if there's any questions, please feel free to ask them this time. I think Sammy is monitoring the chat box. If you want to use that, we can also get questions there.
Yes, absolutely. If anybody has questions, go ahead and pop them into the Q&A. We would be happy to answer those for you. Um, that being said, while we're waiting for any to pop up here, as Glenn mentioned earlier, you can get a copy of these slides or recording. I'll be sending out an email to everyone who attended with an offer for that. So go ahead and reply to my email. I can get you a link to the recording, slides, or answer any questions you have that you may not have asked while you're here. And Glenn, we actually did have one question pop up into the Q&A. Um, are PDSEs also supported for edit via SAE?
Yes, they are. So the PDS, PDSCs, and sequential data sets.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Any other questions that come in quickly, we'll go ahead and answer. Otherwise, as I said, any questions you have that weren't answered, or if you just want to discuss this further, you can reply to the email I'll be sending out after this webinar, and we'd be more than happy to answer your questions or set up a one-on-one call to go over anything you may want to learn further about. It looks like we don't have any other questions coming in right now. So I just want to thank you, Glenn, and everyone who took the time out of their schedule today to join us here. Keep an eye out for my email, and I will make sure to get you anything that you need regarding this presentation and set up anything that you want moving forward to get questions answered or any additional information. Thank you so much again, and have a wonderful day.